"We'll share a bed," said the three Apache sisters to the lonely rancher because he helped them. It was a cold winter morning in the small frontier town of Willow Creek. The kind of cold that made the fingers stiff and the nose sting. The kind that seeped into clothes, no matter how many layers you wore. Snow had fallen the night before, thinly covering the streets, and the sun rose weakly through a gray sky, casting a pale light over the town's wooden buildings. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the few people who dared leave their homes hurried along, heads down, shoulders hunched, hands stuffed into pockets. Among the scattered crowd, a young native woman stood near the edge of the main street. Her hair, dark and glossy, fell over her shoulders, and her cheeks were rosy from the cold. She wore a simple shawl over her shoulders, but it did little to protect her from the biting wind. In her hands she clutched a bundle of handmade candles, tied together with a piece of twine. Her fingers, red and stiff, gripped the candles tightly as if they were a lifeline. She shifted from foot to foot, trying to keep warm, her breath rising in small clouds before disappearing into the cold air. Please buy my candles. I'm freezing," she called, her voice soft but urgent. She spoke politely, almost shyly, hoping that someone would stop and take pity on her. Right. Each time a passerby walked by without even a glance, she felt a small pang of disappointment. But she forced herself to smile.
Selling these candles was not just a way to earn money. It was a matter of survival.
She needed to help her family get through the harsh winter. Most of the townspeople ignored her. Bed. Some hurried past, their boots crunching on the thin layer of snow, carrying baskets or tools, too busy with their own lives to notice a young woman standing alone in the cold. Others tossed a quick, distracted glance but said nothing. Bed. She knew this was how it had always been. People often turned away from someone who seemed weak or poor. Still, she kept her head high and her voice steady. Every small hope that someone would stop kept her moving forward. Then he came. Eli was a cowboy who had been traveling the frontier for months. His clothes were rugged and worn from long days on horseback and in the sun. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, and a long coat hung loosely over his frame, offering little protection from the winter chill. He had come into town early that morning to rest and find supplies for the next leg of his journey. Normally, he would have passed by quickly, ignoring most people he didn't know, but something about the young woman's presence made him pause. She didn't shout or demand. She didn't act desperate in a way that felt unnatural. She simply stood there, holding her candles, shivering, and speaking with the quiet honesty that Eli couldn't ignore. Her eyes, dark and clear, seemed to look straight at him, even as she continued to call out to the crowd.
There was a strength in her, even in her weakness.
A resilience that came not from arrogance or pride, but from necessity and courage. Eli slowed his steps and stopped a few feet away. He watched her for a moment, taking in her expression and the way she tried to warm herself by rubbing her hands together. He noticed the small details, the way her shawl had frayed edges, the careful way she had tied her candles, and the faint traces of snowflakes on her hair. He could see that she had walked a long distance to reach this town, and he sensed the effort it must have taken. The young woman's name was Ayanna. She was 18 years old, though Eli would not have guessed her age at first glance. There was something mature and determined about her, the kind of quiet confidence that comes from facing hardships early in life. Her family lived several miles away on a reservation outside of town. They made a living through small crafts and handmade goods, and Ayanna had learned to help from a very young age. She had grown up watching her mother roll candles, seeing the care and attention it took to make them perfectly straight, to ensure they would burn evenly. Now she had taken it upon herself to sell them in town to help her family through the harsh winter months. Each morning she rose before dawn, walking through the snow to the town center. Her hands often went numb, and her feet ached from the long walk. But she never complained. But she carried her bundle of candles carefully, hoping that someone would recognize the effort behind them. "Please buy my candles, I'm freezing," she said again, her voice firmer this time. A few children passing by smiled at her, but their parents pulled them along quickly. She felt a pang of loneliness, but she didn't give up. Bear. Eli stepped closer.
"How much for a candle?" he asked, his voice low but kind.
Ayanna looked up, surprised. Most people barely gave her a glance.
"1 coin each, sir," she replied politely, holding a candle toward him. Her fingers trembled slightly, not just from the cold, but from the hope that someone might actually stop and help.
Eli handed her a coin, then another, and selected a few candles from her bundle. "You've got a good hand," he said, nodding in approval.
"These look well made." Ayanna smiled, a genuine smile that warmed her face despite the chill. "Thank you, sir," she said. Rasp. "I'd try my best." He could see the effort behind her words. She was proud of her work, but she also needed help, and she didn't hide it. There was honesty in her eyes, a transparency that made Eli feel a strange connection he had not expected. He was used to traveling alone, keeping to himself, but something about her presence made him want to stay longer than he had intended. For a few moments, neither spoke. The wind whistled around them, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke and snow. The town seemed distant, as if the world had slowed down for this brief encounter. Eli noticed the shiver that ran through Ayanna despite her thick shawl. Without thinking, he removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "You'll catch your death in this weather," he said quietly.
"Here, take this." Ayanna's eyes widened. She had not expected such kindness from a stranger, especially in a town where most people ignored her.
"Thank you, sir," she whispered, carefully tucking the coat around her. The warmth seeped into her body immediately, and for the first time that morning, she felt truly comfortable. They continued talking, slowly at first, with Eli asking simple questions about her candles and her family. She responded with calm honesty, telling him about the long hours she spent learning to make candles from her mother, and the hard work it took to sell them in town.
Eli listened quietly, impressed by her diligence and determination.
He realized that this was more than just a young woman selling candles. This was someone who had faced challenges every day of her life and had learned to meet them with grace and courage.
Other townspeople passed by, some glancing curiously, but Eli did not care. He had learned early in life that meaningful encounters were rare, and this one felt significant. The cold no longer mattered, nor did the hurry of the day. For a brief moment, it was just the two of them, connected by simple gestures of kindness and human understanding. Ayanna continued to smile, though she still shivered occasionally. Her eyes sparkled, not just with gratitude, but with a quiet joy that came from being noticed and treated with respect. Eli found himself drawn to her, not in the way one is easily distracted by beauty, but in the way one admires courage and honesty. She had a presence that made the world feel warmer, even on the coldest morning. As the sun rose higher, the town began to fill with more people. Shops opened their doors and the streets became busier. Ayanna's voice grew tired from calling out to passers-by, but she refused to give up. Eli bought a few more candles, joking lightly to make her laugh. Her laughter, soft and melodic, seemed to brighten the gray morning. By the time the town square became lively, Ayanna had sold only a few candles, but the encounter with Eli had given her hope. For the first time that day, she felt seen, appreciated, and safe. Eli, in turn, felt a rare sense of connection that he could not explain. He had traveled through countless towns, met countless people, yet this young woman had left a mark on him, quietly but undeniably. As he mounted his horse to leave, Eli promised to return the next day. Ayanna waved, feeling a mixture of excitement and relief. She continued selling her candles, but now with renewed energy, believing that kindness still existed in the world, even on the coldest mornings. And so, what began as a simple plea, "Please buy my candles, I'm freezing," became the start of something deeper. A human connection forged in the quiet moments of winter, in a small town where warmth came not just from fire but from understanding and compassion. The sun had fully risen. She rubbed her eyes, stretched her stiff body, and silently gave thanks for the small warmth of the coat he had lent her. It had been a long night, filled with worry about whether she would be able to sell enough candles to help her family. Her little cabin on the edge of the reservation was modest, but it was home, and the thought of her mother and younger siblings waiting for her kept her moving even on the coldest mornings.
Ayanna dressed carefully, wrapping herself in layers of cloth and wool.
She checked her bundle of candles one last time, making sure that none had cracked or broken in her hurried packing. Each candle had been carefully rolled and dried over several days, a process her mother had taught her since she was very young.
She knew that the quality of her candles mattered. They had to burn evenly and smell pleasant, or no one would want to buy them. It was more than just a task. It was a tradition, a connection to her family and her heritage. The walk to town was harder than she remembered from the day before. The snow had thickened overnight, and the wind cut sharply across her face. Each step was difficult, her boots sinking slightly into the soft, icy layer covering the ground. Her hands ached despite the thick gloves she wore, and her shawl, though warm, could not block the biting gusts that seemed to come from every direction.
Bear. Still, she pressed on, her determination stronger than her fatigue. When she arrived in the town square, she found it slowly coming to life.
Merchants were opening their stalls displaying goods for sale, vegetables, fabrics, firewood, and tools. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery mixed with the sharp scent of smoke from the chimneys. People hurried past, carrying baskets and bundles, speaking quickly as they went about their day. It was a world that could feel both vibrant and unwelcoming, depending on how much patience one had. Ayanna set her bundle of candles carefully on the corner of the square, arranging them so that each one looked neat and inviting. She straightened her back and wrapped her coat tightly around her shoulders, taking a deep breath. "Please buy my candles, I'm freezing," she called, her voice steady, though it carried the weight of exhaustion. The first few passers-by ignored her. A man in a heavy coat muttered something under his breath as he hurried past. A woman with a child glanced at the candles but did not stop. Each time she was overlooked, Ayanna felt a small ache in her chest. Selling candles in a town where people often passed without care was never easy, and the cold only made it more difficult. Still, she reminded herself that she could not give up. Each coin she earned brought her family closer to having enough food and warmth for the winter. But as the morning wore on, the chill deepened. Her fingers turned red and stiff despite gloves, and her lips cracked from the wind. But she rubbed her hands together, trying to warm them, and shifted from foot to foot. Every time she called out, her voice felt hoarse, but she refused to retreat. She had seen too many winters pass where her family struggled simply because no one had helped them. She would not let another day go by without trying. Around mid-morning, Eli appeared. He had returned just as he had promised, walking casually down the snow-covered street. His boots crunched on the icy ground, and the long coat he wore was dusted lightly with snow. When he saw Ayanna, his eyes lit up with recognition. He noticed the effort in her posture, the way she carefully tended to her candles despite the cold. He approached her stall with a calm and steady presence, a reassuring figure in the otherwise indifferent town square. "Good morning," he said, tipping his hat.
How are you holding up today? Ayana managed a tired smile.
Beth.
I'm managing, she said. It's colder than yesterday, but I'll be all right. She glanced down at the coins she had already earned, which were few but precious. Thank you for yesterday, she added softly. You didn't have to stop for me. Eiley shook his head. I wanted to. You're doing hard work, and I admire that.
He looked around and picked up a candle, examining it closely.
These are very well made. You've got a talent.
Ayana felt a flicker of pride. Compliments were rare, and when they came from someone she respected, they meant even more.
Thank you, she said. I learned from my mother.
We have been making candles in our family for generations. It's something I try to honor. Eli nodded, impressed by her words. It shows, he said.
They're steady, even, and the scent is nice. You must put a lot of care into each one. Ayana's chest warmed at his appreciation. It was not just about selling candles. It was about being seen, being recognized for effort and skill. Most people ignored that, but Eli seemed genuinely interested. She felt a connection forming, fragile but real, and it made the long, cold hours in the square a little more bearable. Despite Eli's presence, business was slow. The townspeople were often preoccupied with their own needs and concerns. Some glanced at the candles but moved on, their attention elsewhere. Ayana continued calling politely, holding out her candles and trying to engage with anyone who passed. Each sale, however small, was a victory.
Each coin she received was a step toward helping her family survive the winter. By midday, Ayana's fingers were stiff and numb again, despite the coat Eli had lent her. She rubbed them vigorously and shook her hands to bring back circulation.
Bang. Her face was flushed from the cold, and her breath came in small, visible clouds. Yet she persisted. She reminded herself that she had done this before and could do it again. She was used to hardship. She had learned to endure it and keep going. Eli stayed nearby, occasionally buying another candle or simply talking to her to pass the time. He asked about her family, about the reservation she came from, and about how long she had been helping her family in this way.
Ayana answered with honesty, revealing just enough to make him understand her situation without feeling the need to overshare.
She spoke about the pride she felt in her family's traditions, about the satisfaction of creating something useful and beautiful, and about the responsibility she carried to help her younger siblings. The more Eli listened, the more he respected her. He had met many people during his travels, merchants, farmers, other travelers. But few had the quiet strength and determination that Ayana displayed. She was different. She did not complain about her hardships, yet she did not hide them either. She faced the world directly, with courage and dignity, and it made Eli feel a growing admiration for her. As the day wore on, Ayana began to feel exhausted. Her body ached from standing and walking in the cold. Her hands were numb, and her legs felt weak. She considered packing up early, worried that she might not be able to finish the day. But then she saw Eli approaching again, smiling, and she felt a renewed sense of energy.
He handed her a small loaf of bread he had purchased from the bakery.
Here, he said. Eat something. You'll need your strength to get through the rest of the day. Ayana accepted it gratefully, taking small bites and savoring the warmth and sustenance. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. He cared not just about the candles he bought, but about her well-being. In a world that often ignored her, it was a comforting thought. By late afternoon, the sun had dropped low in the sky,
casting long shadows across the town square. The streets had begun to empty as people returned to their homes. Ayana had sold only a few candles, but the experience of the day had left her feeling accomplished. She had faced the cold, endured the disinterest of passers-by, and persisted in her work. She had survived another day, and she had gained the support of someone who truly cared. Eli lingered, helping her pack up the remaining candles. "You did well today," he said, his tone sincere.
"But not many people would have kept going like you did."
Ayana smiled, feeling a quiet pride. "Thank you," she said. "It's not easy, but I have to try. My family depends on me."
"I understand, and I'll help however I can." As they walked together toward the edge of the square, the first stars began to twinkle in the sky. The cold was still present, but the warmth of human connection made it easier to bear. Ayana felt a spark of hope, a sense that perhaps, even in a harsh world, there were people who could be trusted, who could be counted on, and who could make life a little brighter. For Eli, the day had been eye-opening. He had met someone who challenged his usual perspective on life, someone who reminded him of the strength and resilience that existed even in the most difficult circumstances.
Ayana had made an impression on him, one that would linger long after he left the town.
And so, what had begun as a simple morning of selling candles had transformed into a day of quiet learning, mutual respect, and the first steps toward a deeper understanding between two very different lives. The winter was harsh, and the world could be unforgiving. But in that moment, with snow falling lightly around them and the warmth of shared kindness in their hearts, both Ayana and Ellie felt something rare, a sense of connection, of hope, and of the possibility that even small acts of courage and compassion could change a life. The next morning, Ayana woke before the sun, as she always did. Her body ached slightly from the long day in the cold, but her heart felt lighter. The coat Eli had lent her the day before still carried a faint warmth, and she carefully folded it before putting it back in her bag. Best. She reminded herself that every day she walked to town was an opportunity, not just to earn coins, but to prove to herself that she could endure hardships and still stand tall. She dressed in layers, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders and making sure her gloves were secure. Each layer felt like armor against the harsh wind, but she knew it would not be enough to stop the cold entirely. She checked her bundle of candles, counting them carefully. Each candle represented hours of effort, care, and the hope that her family would have enough to survive the coming weeks. As she stepped out into the snow-covered streets, the morning air was crisp and sharp. Her boots crunched against the ice, and her breath rose in small clouds, vanishing into the gray sky. The town was waking slowly, merchants opening their stalls, children rushing past, and the occasional traveler moving toward the distant hills. Ayana's heart beat steadily, not from the walk, but from the anticipation of seeing Ellie. He had promised to return, and she had not forgotten. When she reached her usual corner, arranging her candles neatly, she noticed him before he noticed her.
Eli was walking toward the square, his boots leaving clear tracks in the snow. He wore his long coat and a hat tipped low, but she recognized him immediately.
His presence brought a small, involuntary smile to her face. There was a warmth in his eyes that seemed to cut through the cold, a reassurance that made the world feel less harsh.
"Good morning," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "You look ready to take on the day?"
Ayana laughed softly, her breath visible in the cold. "I try," she replied. "The cold is never easy, but it is something I have learned to live with." Eli nodded, moving closer.
"I admire that. Not many people would have this courage."
He paused, looking at the carefully arranged candles. "You take great care in your work. It shows." Band.
Ayana's chest warmed at his words. It was more than just selling candles. It was being recognized for her dedication.
She had worked hard to learn her craft, to honor her family, and to prove to herself that she could persevere.
Hearing Eli acknowledge it made her feel seen in a way that few others had ever managed.
The morning passed slowly. Ayanna called out to passers-by politely, holding her candles with careful hands.
Some ignored her, others glanced quickly, but few stopped to buy. Eli stayed nearby, sometimes purchasing a candle, sometimes just talking. Their conversation flowed naturally, starting with simple topics, the weather, the candles, the town, but slowly moving into more personal matters. Eli asked about her family, and she spoke openly, telling him about her mother, her younger siblings, and the traditions that had shaped her life. But she spoke of long hours spent learning to roll candles, of the pride she felt in creating something that brought warmth and light, and of the responsibility she carried to help her family survive the winter.
I can see why you work so hard, Eli said quietly.
Bet you have a lot of strength, not just in your body, but in your heart.
Ayanna looked at him, her dark eyes meeting his. There was a sincerity in his gaze that made her pause.
Few people spoke like that, not just noticing what you did, but recognizing who you were. She felt a quiet trust forming, a connection that was rare and precious. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives.
Eli spoke of his travels, the towns he had passed through, and the solitude of life on the trail.
Ayanna listened with interest, imagining the vast landscapes he had seen, the challenges he had faced alone. In turn, she shared stories of her home, her family, and the small joys of life on the reservation. The laughter of children, the smell of candles as they dried, the quiet satisfaction of completing a task well done. The more they spoke, the more their bond grew. It was a connection built not on superficial attraction, but on understanding and respect.
Eli admired her courage and dedication. Ayanna appreciated his kindness and the way he listened without judgment.
In a town that often felt indifferent, they had found someone who truly saw them. As the sun climbed higher, the cold seemed less sharp. Ayanna felt a small warmth spread through her chest, a comfort that had nothing to do with the coat or the sun.
It was the presence of someone who cared, who understood, who treated her not as a lonely vendor, but as a person with a story and a spirit.
Eli offered to help her with her stall when the wind picked up. He moved a few candles to shield them from the gusts, adjusting their placement so they would not fall. Ayanna watched, grateful not just for the help, but for the silent respect in his actions. He did not speak over her, nor did he try to take control. He simply assisted, recognizing her effort and contributing where he could. As the day went on, more people began to notice her candles, drawn perhaps by the subtle aroma or the neat arrangement. A few coins changed hands, and each sale brought a small relief, a reminder that her hard work had value. Yet it was Eli's presence that made the day bearable. Without his support, the cold and isolation would have felt heavier. With him nearby, even the busiest moments of the square felt lighter, filled with a sense of shared purpose. By mid-afternoon, Ayanna was exhausted. Her feet ached from standing, her fingers were stiff, and her voice was hoarse from calling out to potential customers. But when she looked at Eli, she felt renewed energy. He smiled, handing her a warm cup of tea he had purchased from a nearby stall. The small gesture brought immediate comfort, warming her hands and lifting her spirits. "Thank you," she said softly, taking a sip. "It's not easy to stay warm out here." "You're welcome," Eli replied.
You deserve it, and you've earned every bit of it today. They continued talking as the sun began to dip toward the horizon.
The streets slowly emptied, leaving only the two of them in the fading light. Ayanna began packing up the remaining candles while Eli helped carefully, ensuring none were damaged. Shared effort, quiet and unspoken, strengthened their bond further. As they worked, Eli asked gently. Do you ever take time for yourself, Ayanna? To rest or enjoy something just for you? Ayanna hesitated, then shook her head. Not really, she admitted. But I have responsibilities. My family depends on me. But I find small joys where I can. Breath. Making the candles, seeing them sold, hearing someone appreciate the work. It matters. Ellie nodded thoughtfully. Bay. It does matter. And you matter too. Don't forget that. Her cheeks flushed at his words, and for a moment she looked away, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the cold. It was a feeling she had rarely experienced, a recognition of her value, not for what she could sell, but for who she was. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Ellie offered to walk with her part of the way back toward her home. She accepted, grateful not just for the company, but for the sense of safety his presence provided. They walked in silence for a time, the crunch of snow beneath their boots the only sound. The cold remained, but the shared experience of the day, the mutual understanding and the quiet companionship made it easier to bear. At the edge of the reservation they paused. Beck. Eli looked at Ayanna, his expression serious yet gentle. You're doing amazing work, he said.
And you're stronger than most people I've met. Don't ever forget that. Ayanna smiled, feeling a swell of pride and gratitude.
Thank you, she said. It means a lot to hear that from someone who has seen so much of the world.
They parted then, with a promise that he would return the next day. Ayanna watched him ride off, feeling a mixture of excitement and calm.
For the first time in a long while, she felt that her efforts were recognized, her struggles understood, and her spirit appreciated.
As she returned to her small cabin, she reflected on the day.
It had been difficult, exhausting, and at times discouraging. Yet in the midst of the challenge she had found a connection, a human bond that brought warmth to her heart. Eli was unlike anyone she had met. Kind, patient, and genuine. The way he listened, the small acts of care, and the shared moments of understanding had left a mark on her. That night, as she prepared for sleep, Ayanna felt a quiet hope. The winter would still be harsh, and her work would continue to be difficult, but she was no longer entirely alone. In Eli, she had found a friend, a supporter, and perhaps something more. Someone who saw her not just as a young woman selling candles in the cold, but as a person worthy of respect, admiration, and care. And for Eli, the day had been just as meaningful. He had encountered someone who challenged him, inspired him, and reminded him of the quiet strength that existed in the world. He had learned that courage and kindness often went hand in hand, and that even in the coldest places warmth could be found, not in fire, but in human connection. The night closed in over Willow Creek, and the stars shone brightly above. Two lives, so different in experience and circumstance, had begun to weave together through shared moments of struggle, understanding, and quiet care.
It was a beginning, fragile yet promising, of a connection that would grow stronger with each passing day.
The following morning, Ayanna rose to a sky painted with pale pink and gold streaks. Winter had settled deeper into the land, and a fresh layer of snow lay quietly across the fields and streets. The air was crisp, and even as she dressed in her warmest layers, the cold made her cheeks tingle and her fingers ache. Yet her heart carried a sense of anticipation.
Eli would be returning, and the thought of seeing him lifted her spirits as she prepared her bundle of candles. She carefully arranged each candle in neat rows, making sure none were broken.
Each one was a small piece of her effort, her dedication, and her love for her family. The process was meditative, and as she worked, she thought about the conversation she and Eli had shared the day before. His words, simple yet sincere, lingered in her mind.
It was unusual for someone outside her family to notice her courage, her struggles, and the care she put into her work.
Bo.
And yet Eli had done exactly that. When she reached her usual spot in the town square, she found the place already waking up. Merchants were opening their shops, smoke rising from chimneys, and children ran past laughing. Ayanna set her candles carefully, brushing off any snow that had collected overnight. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for the long hours ahead. Soon, Eli arrived, his boots crunching in the snow, his long coat dusted with white. He tipped his hat and smiled. "Good morning," he said. "You look ready for another day in the cold." Ayanna smiled back, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the weather. "I am," she replied. "Brace. The cold is sharp, but it is manageable." She paused. "I am glad to see you again." He moved closer, keeping a respectful distance, yet his presence was comforting.
I'm glad to be here, he said. I wanted to check on you and see how things are going. The morning passed slowly, as it always did.
The streets were filled with townspeople moving about, some stopping at the stalls to buy bread or firewood, but many ignoring the small candle vendor in the corner. Ayanna continued calling out, holding her candles with care, her voice steady despite the cold. Each sale was small, sometimes only one candle at a time, but each coin she received mattered. Eli stayed nearby, occasionally buying a candle, sometimes just talking with her to pass the time. They spoke about simple things at first, the weather, the town, the routines of daily life, but soon their conversation deepened. Eli asked about her family's traditions, and Ayanna shared stories of how her mother taught her to make the candles, the care required, and the pride her family took in their work. I can see how much you love what you do, Eli said, examining one of the candles carefully. Bay.
It shows in every detail. Ayanna smiled faintly. It is more than just love.
It is responsibility. My family depends on me. I have learned to work hard and endure hardship, but I also find joy in creating something useful and beautiful. Eli nodded, understanding more about her than most people he had met. He had spent months traveling alone, seeing towns and people, but Ayanna's presence struck him differently. She was someone who balanced strength and humility, courage and kindness, all at once. It was rare, and he recognized it immediately. As the day progressed, the wind grew colder, and the snow began to fall lightly again. Ayanna's fingers and cheeks turned red from the cold, and her voice grew hoarse from calling out. Yet she refused to give up. Eli noticed her struggle and offered small gestures to ease her burden. He adjusted her display to protect the candles from the wind, helped carry a few heavier bundles, and brought her warm tea from a nearby stall. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. "It's okay to accept help." Ayanna looked at him, surprised. Most people in the town ignored her, but Eli's presence and words were different. They carried respect, kindness, and genuine concern. "Thank you," she said softly. "I am grateful for your help, Bay. It makes this day easier." They spent hours together talking, laughing softly at small jokes, and sharing stories of their lives. Eli told her about distant towns, wide rivers, and lonely nights under the stars. Ayanna shared her experiences of life on the reservation, her family, and the challenges she faced each winter. They discovered that despite the differences in their lives, they had much in common: resilience, appreciation for simple joys, and a deep respect for the people they cared about. The bond between them grew stronger, a quiet understanding forming in the small gestures, shared stories, and moments of compassion.
Eli admired her courage and dedication, while Ayanna appreciated his patience, kindness, and willingness to listen without judgment.
In a town that often felt indifferent, they had found someone who truly saw them, someone who cared enough to be present. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Ayana began to pack up her remaining candles. Her body was tired, but her heart felt lighter. Eli helped carefully, making sure none of the candles were damaged. They moved together with quiet efficiency, their teamwork unspoken but natural. There was a rhythm to their cooperation, a comfort in the shared task. At one point, Eli paused and asked gently, "Do you ever take time for yourself? To rest? Or enjoy something just for you?"
Ayana hesitated, then shook her head.
Not often, she admitted. I have responsibilities.
But I try to find small joys in what I do. Making the candles, helping my family, seeing people appreciate them. It is meaningful. Psst. Eli nodded, understanding.
It is meaningful.
But you are meaningful too, Ayana. Don't forget that. Bah. Her cheeks flushed at his words, and she looked down, feeling a warmth she had rarely felt before. It was not just the physical warmth from the tea or the coat he had lent her. It was the warmth of being recognized, valued, and respected. It was a feeling she had longed for but had seldom experienced. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the town in a soft golden glow, Eli offered to walk with her part of the way back to her home. Ayana accepted, grateful not only for the company but for the sense of safety his presence provided. They walked in silence for a while, the crunch of snow under their boots the only sound. The cold was still present, but the shared experience made it more bearable. Along the way, they spoke about dreams and hopes, imagining a future where challenges could be met together and small joys could be shared more freely. Ellie shared a story of a distant town, where he had witnessed people helping each other in times of need, and Ayana spoke of her dreams for her family, wishing for warmth, safety, and enough food during the harsh winters. By the time they reached the edge of the reservation, the first stars had begun to appear in the sky. Eli looked at her, his expression gentle. "You are remarkable," he said. "Your strength, your courage, your kindness, it is inspiring."
I hope you know that. Ayana felt a quiet happiness swell within her. "Thank you," she said softly.
Your words mean more than you know. They parted with a promise that he would return the next day. Ayana watched him ride off, feeling a sense of hope and comfort she had not known before. She realized that the cold and hardship of the day had been softened by the bond they had formed, a bond built on mutual respect, kindness, and understanding. That night, as she prepared for sleep, Ayana reflected on the day. The world was still harsh and unpredictable, but she no longer felt entirely alone. In Eli, she had found a companion, someone who saw her not just as a vendor, but as a person with value, courage, and a spirit worth knowing. For Eli, the day had been equally meaningful. He had encountered someone who reminded him of the strength that exists quietly in the world, the courage that often goes unnoticed, and the importance of compassion and patience. Ayana had touched his life in a way few people had, and he felt a growing desire to be there for her, to support her, and to learn more about her world. Winter continued to descend over the land, bringing longer nights and colder days. But in the midst of the snow and frost, a new warmth had begun to grow. A warmth born not of fire, but of trust, companionship, and the simple profound comfort of being truly seen by another person. And so, their story continued one day at a time, through shared struggles, quiet conversations, and small gestures of care. Ayana and Eli had begun to build a connection that went beyond friendship. It was a bond formed in the heart of winter, growing slowly but steadily, rooted in respect, understanding, and the hope that even the coldest days could be brightened by human kindness. The following morning, the town of Willow Creek woke to a fresh blanket of snow. The winter was harsh, colder than it had been in years, and the wind carried a sharp bite that made even the hardiest townspeople shiver. Ayana woke before sunrise, her body stiff from the long days she had spent selling candles, but her spirit lighter than it had been in weeks. She dressed in layers, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders and checking her bundle of candles carefully. Each candle represented her effort, her family, and the small hope that she could make life easier for those she loved. As she stepped outside, the snow crunched beneath her boots. The town square was quiet, the streets glistening under the early morning sun. She arranged her candles neatly on her usual corner, brushing off any stray snowflakes and straightening each row. Her fingers were cold, and her cheeks tingled from the wind. But she smiled, thinking of the promise Eli had made the day before. He would be returning, and knowing he would be there gave her courage and comfort. Soon enough, she saw him approaching. Eli's boots left tracks in the fresh snow, and his coat was dusted with white. He tipped his hat, smiling warmly. "Good morning, Ayana," he said. "Are you ready for another day?" Ayana smiled back, feeling a sense of calm she had not felt in a long time. "Yes," she replied. "I will manage." "Best. It is cold, but I have grown used to it." They spent the morning together as they had before.
Eli helped her with small tasks, moving candles to shield them from the wind, carrying a few heavier bundles, and offering words of encouragement when the cold seemed unbearable.
They spoke quietly at first, sharing stories of simple things: the snow, the town, the distant hills Eli had traveled through. But as the day went on, their conversations deepened, touching on dreams, hopes, and the small joys they found in life. Eli told Ayana about distant towns he had seen, wide rivers, and starry nights spent alone on the trail. Ayana shared stories of her family, the laughter of her younger siblings, and the quiet satisfaction of completing her work. They discovered that despite their different worlds, they shared much in common: resilience, determination, and an appreciation for the small moments that made life meaningful. As the morning turned into afternoon, the town square grew busier. Passers-by finally began to notice Ayana's candles, drawn perhaps by the neat arrangement, the faint aroma, or the care in her work. She sold more than she had in the previous days, but the real comfort came not from the coins but from Eli's presence. His support made even the busiest moments feel lighter, the cold easier to bear. At one point, a strong gust of wind blew through the square, sending a few candles tumbling. Ayana's hands moved quickly to catch them, but Eli stepped forward to help, carefully adjusting the display to prevent further mishaps.
There, he said softly. Now they're safe.
"You don't have to manage everything alone." Ayana looked at him, her dark eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "It is easier with someone to help." "Bear, you have been very kind."
He smiled.
"You deserve it!" "You work hard and you care deeply about your family. That is something to be admired." By late afternoon, the sun was low in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the town square. Ayana began to pack up her remaining candles, feeling both tired and accomplished. Her body ached from standing and walking in the cold, but her heart was full. The day had been long, yet it was also filled with moments of connection and understanding that made it feel brighter than any other winter day.
Eli stayed with her, carrying the remaining candles carefully. "You've done well today," he said.
"Not just in selling your candles, but in facing the cold, the people who ignored you, and the long hours. You are stronger than most would believe." Ayana smiled faintly, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the sun.
Thank you, she said softly.
Buzz.
Your words and your presence have made this day easier. I did not feel alone in my work. They walked together toward the edge of the reservation, the snow crunching softly beneath their boots.
The wind had calmed, and the first stars began to appear in the sky.
twinkling faintly above the quiet town.
Ayanna felt a sense of peace she had not experienced in months.
Bet. The winter was harsh, yet in Eli's company it seemed more bearable, almost gentle. As they reached the small path leading to her home, Eli turned to her, his expression earnest. "Ayanna," he said, "I have traveled many places, met many people, but you are different. You have strength, courage, and kindness in ways that inspire me. I feel a connection with you that I have not felt before." Ayanna's heart skipped a beat. She had felt a bond growing between them, but hearing him express it aloud made it real. "Eli," she whispered, "I feel it too." "You have been kind, patient, and understanding. You see me, not just the work I do, but who I am." He smiled, a gentle warmth in his eyes. "I hope you know that you are never alone. I want to be here for you, not just in the square, but wherever life takes us." Her cheeks flushed, and a shy smile spread across her face. "I would like that," she said softly. "I feel safer and happier with you by my side." The two stood together for a moment, the snow falling lightly around them, the quiet world holding its breath. In that stillness, a new understanding passed between them, a realization that their bond had grown into something more than friendship. It was a connection built on trust, respect, and the small acts of care that had brought them together. Ellie offered to help her carry her remaining candles into her home. She accepted, grateful for the support and companionship. Inside her small cabin, the warmth from the stove welcomed them. Ayanna's family greeted her quietly, noticing the familiar kindness of Eli in the way he carried himself, respectful and considerate. Her mother smiled faintly, approving of the young cowboy who had treated her daughter with care and respect. That evening, as the snow continued to fall outside, Ayanna and Eli sat together, sharing tea and conversation. The room was filled with a soft glow from the stove, the quiet crackle of the fire, and the gentle comfort of human connection. They spoke of hopes, dreams, and the future, imagining ways they could support each other and their families, and sharing stories of the small joys in life. Eli learned more about Ayanna's world, her family, their traditions, and the challenges they faced during winter. Ayanna, in turn, learned about his travels, his experiences on the trail, and the lessons he had gathered along the way. Each story brought them closer, building trust, understanding, and a sense of shared purpose. As night deepened, Ayanna realized how much she had grown to depend on Eli's presence. Not out of necessity, but because his support, understanding, and gentle humor had become a source of comfort. For the first time, she imagined a life where she was not alone, where someone could share both the hardships and the joys. Eli, too, felt a sense of fulfillment he had not known before. He had traveled alone for months, meeting many people, yet none had touched his heart as Ayanna had. Her strength, determination, and honesty inspired him, and her warmth, kindness, and gentle spirit made him wish to be near her always. Days turned into weeks, and their connection continued to grow. Each morning they met in the town square, working together, sharing moments of laughter and supporting one another through the cold. Each evening they returned to her home, sharing stories and companionship, deepening the trust and bond that had started with a simple act of kindness. Winter was still harsh, but it no longer felt unbearable. The cold and snow were softened by the warmth of human connection, shared experiences, and the quiet understanding that comes from truly seeing another person. Ayanna had found someone who valued her, respected her, and cared for her, while Eli had discovered a friendship and love that grounded him in ways he had never imagined. In time, what had begun as a simple encounter, "Please buy my candles, I'm freezing," became a turning point in both their lives. It was more than a plea for coins. It was the start of a relationship built on trust, respect, and genuine care. They had met in a small, snow-covered town, but the bond they had formed promised to carry them through many winters to come. And so, in the heart of a cold winter, amidst the snow and quiet streets, Ayanna and Ellie found warmth, not from fire or sunlight, but from each other. Their days were filled with shared work, laughter, and understanding, their nights with conversation, comfort, and the knowledge that they had found someone to face the challenges of life with. What began as a fleeting moment of kindness had grown into something lasting and meaningful, a bond that would endure through cold winters, hard days, and uncertain times. It was the kind of love and companionship that changes lives quietly, steadily, and beautifully. And for Ayanna and Eli, it was only the beginning.